Recording is officially starting now. In terms of decorum for the meeting, I ask that you align with the constitutional values that I just spoke of. Failure to result or reframe your comments in a respectful manner will result in your immediate removal into a waiting room where you will be met by me and our speaker or deputy speaker to further discuss and talk out any kind of poor behavior. Our speaker and deputy speaker will be facilitating a walkthrough of some captures of our data so far and the questions that we have to facilitate your perspectives. They'll operate informally with Robert's rules and will also have a speakers list to keep things organized. If at any time you're in particular need of something, please feel free to message us in the chat, but refrain from putting your perspectives in the chat until you're called upon by your speaker or deputy speaker. The chat will be strictly for any communication purposes, not for putting big walls of text. And this will just, again, respect the speaker's list and the rhythm of our discussion. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Kirsten and Jill. The executive and I are on the call to take our own version of handwritten notes, but we will also be relying on this recording to keep on record for the society and the student leaders that come after us and the members that come after us to ensure this is appropriately captured and documented in our records. So with that said, thank you very much. Kirsten and Jill, you are on.
Excellent. I have the pleasure to be provide a bit of a whirlwind introduction to some of the initial findings from our survey data. Notably, we have not yet done any of the qualitative analysis, so this is very high level introductory material. This page shows the frequency of usage of our services. Somewhat unsurprisingly, our bus pass, grad club, and health and dental plan are our most used services. This aligns somewhat predictably with what we saw for folks' priorities when it comes to our services, with the highest ranking, lowest number because number one was highest priority, our highest rankings being our health and dental plan and our bus pass. Events are quite significant at SOGS. So we see here that although the highest number of attendees or members have never attended an event, most of our members have attended at least one event, if we consider this rarely, sometimes, most of the time, and always categories together. Some of the things that prevented attendance are admittedly things outside of our control, such as academic commitments and work commitments. Though we see some of the other high responses here are the timing of the events and a lack of interest. A lot of people get involved with SOGS because of their interests or hobbies or interest in skills development, followed closely by resume CV development. When asked if members would be willing to see a fee increase, we mostly see people being indecisive on this. My admittedly personal take on this is that folks may be open to an increase, but only if it aligns with their priorities and a clear explanation of the increase is provided. But that's possibly my bias. When we get a little more general and look at priorities in general, we see that the highest ranked, so again, lowest number being highest ranked, priorities among our membership are affordability and academic concerns. The lowest ranked priorities were civic duties, international concerns, and national concerns. When we look at folks' priorities regarding student governance in particular, we see a lot of interest in accessibility, accountability, actionable change, and transparency. But as you can see, this was a much more mixed results in that we don't see those very low numbers. A lot of things are more in that 4 through 7 range. So there's less consensus on this question. I wanted to end by talking about our strengths and weaknesses because I think they frame our conversation strongly, because we can either take a strengths-based approach where we lean into our strengths and try to do more of them, or more of a weakness-based approach where we try to address our weaknesses and improve those areas. So in this regard, our strengths currently were identified as being the grad club and our services, followed by financial and living support, such as our subsidies and social events. Looking to our weaknesses, we see a lot of focus on our community outreach and advocacy, our financial and living support, and a lot of people are more unsure. Notably, it's useful during your comments. I'm happy to go back to any of these slides as we continue the discussion. And with that, I gladly get to turn things over to Jill.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jill. I am the deputy speaker. So I will be helping Kirsten moderate to some degree this discussion. If you would like to bring something up or speak, please either raise your hand or send me a message and I will add you to the speakers list. I apologize, I talk fast. Awesome, thank you. So we have some prompts for everyone to consider in their discussion. If you'd like to bring up some of these points or other points, we welcome those. But just to kind of prompt the discussion and get it moving a little bit. Initially, is it helpful if I read these or? Yes, okay. So the first one, what is core to our mission, who we are, or our vision, what we want to become? What headlines do you want to see about SOGS in the next 5 years, and which priorities will best get us there? What accomplishments would make you most proud to be a SOGS member? What do we need? What do we most need to invest in so as to teach successes, labor, bursaries, scholarships, subsidies? Actionability was identified as a priority. What sort of actions are you most interested in seeing? For example, protests, petitions, specific outcomes. Academic concerns were identified as a priority. What are your primary academic concerns? Affordability, also identified as a priority. Which topics are of most pressing concern in this regard, be it housing, tuition, groceries, etc., and anything else that you may want to bring to the discussion. And so I think with that, we will open the floor. However, most you feel comfortable indicating you'd like to speak, please do so.
Excellent. It helps when I can find my unmute button. Ashton, go right ahead.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for putting this survey together and putting it up for our constituents to give their honest feedback. I just wanted to get some information, so I guess this is more of a point of information, about 2 points on the questions that are going to be directed. What is SOG's current mission? I just didn't want to look it up on my own because that might help me think about what we should be, or if we should continue being what we are. And then also, I feel like the term actionability is a bit weird because SOGS has so many action things that we do. I'm just thinking, is there a better way to frame the term just so that, for me, it makes more sense? Because when I think about raising awareness about issues, that helps to bring people to get involved or do something about it or behave differently. For instance, I do a lot of accessibility work, and a lot of awareness raising about accessibility issues makes people a lot more cognizant in how they change their behavior and interact with people with disabilities. So I don't know what actionability really means. Like, how does that differentiate from anything else?
Kirsten, I can step in to answer Ashton's first question. So, I mean, honestly, Ashton, you hit the nail on the head. We don't necessarily have an explicit mission statement, which is why we're also doing this work. But in our Constitution and bylaws document, we do have, as part of our Constitution, an outline of the Society's purposes in section 1.2, which I'll just read out right now to give context, and then you'll kind of see the loose nature of which our mission has stood since 1976 when we were founded. So we have 4 sub-purposes. The first is to give graduate students a recognized organization through which they can express their needs and opinions. Second, to be an advocate for grad students on issues and concerns affecting their life at Western. Third, provide programs and services for grad students. And fourth, to represent graduate student issues and concerns with administration and other organizations. And you're familiar with our mission statement as well, which kind of gives like that Constitution ethos about, again, it's founded on mutual respect and dignity for our collective work. But in terms of actually, you know, as a registered not-for-profit, our mission needs realignment or more nuance to what we want to work towards. So this was a good way to start the discussion. But Kirsten, I'll turn it back to you just because I can see another hand up. So I'll let you start volleying back and forth between different speakers.
Yeah, I also wanted to address that question of actionability, which is admittedly part of my lazy translation for the slides. Let me double check what the original language was. Actionable change is how it's framed in the survey, in case that helps you understand differently what we're trying to clarify here. Our next speaker on the speakers list is Chris.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
My name is Chris, and I'm a PhD student. I have a question related to the diversity in your team, people leading SOGS. Do you have international students among you, or it's just Canadian students leading?
I'm seeing Yusuf with his hand up to address that.
Hi, Chris. Is that how you pronounce your name? I'm just making sure.
Yeah, Chris.
Yes, I'm a VP Advocacy. I'm from Pakistan. I'm an international student. And do you have a follow-up question as well?
Yeah, my question is because I'm an international student. This is my first year at Western. And yeah, just arriving here was quite a real struggle. I think if there's a possibility to do better in how you are welcoming new students, I'll give a typical example here. I came from South Africa, and I landed very late at night. I didn't even know the north, the south. So if you are an international student and you travel to any country you don't know of, if there is some sort of organization that can really help students to find their way even to London to arrive, the first few days to know how you are going to be around here, that will be really useful. It may not be a money problem. It may just be some sort of proper guidance. So my experience was landing late at night in Toronto and having to get an Uber because I couldn't know what to do. And that was quite expensive. And arriving here, lucky, I found a couple of people online I spoke to who welcomed me late at night just to find a night. And next day I needed to figure out where to find a Airbnb. And if you don't know the country, you don't know the town, you may find yourself on the other side of the town while you have to come to the campus. So this kind of support for international students, if somebody had thought about it before or tried to help even accommodating students for 1-2 days, a time for them to figure out their environment and to know where to go next, that will be a bit of helpful. That's just in terms of the arrival and welcome of international students. I think you have really some work to do. And if I can help in the process, so no other student has to go through what I went through, that will be quite amazing. Thank you.
If I can respond as well, Kirsten?
If it's on topics to strategic planning, certainly. Otherwise, I'd ask that you maybe follow up with Chris individually.
Okay, I think I can, Chris, if you can email me at my advocacy@sogs.ca email. We can continue this conversation.
Is this an individual issue just happen to me, or all international students are going through it?
Yes, Chris, but the purpose of the town hall right now is to talk about what we want to work on moving forward for the strategic plan. This is valuable feedback from an international perspective.
You don't want to work on this one. It's not part of what you want to work on.
No, that's not true, because we just released an entire survey and launched a petition today.
I'm posing a problem that I believe affects many students, right?
Yes.
If it doesn't affect you, you can just push it under the rug, we forget about it, but it affects many students. And if it does, you should give it the same importance as other Canadian students who have problems, who are struggling here, that you want to address now, right? You can just have the decency of putting it in your agenda and saying that instead of saying, let's put it under the rug, send us an email, treat us as individual while we are struggling in group. I'm not the only student who went through this.
No,
and when I'm bringing it for, should we create an international student group to talk for ourselves, or we should be part of SOGS?
Yeah, and this is why we're so glad that you shared your point here, so that it can be on our agenda and we can bring it back to our various committees.
From your representative? He offered the answer, you cut him off. Can I get an answer from him to hear what he has to say to what I said?
Again, if it's on topic for this meeting, I am happy to do that. If you need to have a larger conversation, our VP advocacy can do that in other meetings, because other people also have their hands up and would like to be heard.
I'll just make it a very quick.
So I'm going to step out of the meeting, and yeah, you can have a good business day. So you can continue doing. I pretty much have an idea of what it means, right? It's a clear answer to me. You said, I'm bringing a problem that affects many students. You are clearly telling me you cannot address it in this meeting because you have your own agenda. I have to send a personal email. It means this will never be addressed as part of SOGS concern, that there are a group of students who are struggling and need help in this. I don't want to be difficult. I just want to bring, Canada talks a lot about diversity, integration. You know, it's like a marketing thing you put there for people to buy. You need to take that and start to practice it. Because what you're saying, I left a position, I was a managing director of a company. I took a PhD here. I had to leave
And again,
my
Chris,
house,
we
get
want
on
your
the plane,
attention.
come here. What I'm saying here is, this is important. It's not something you have to put down the rack to say it's not of importance for us. That's why I asked if international students are represented, because if you are an international student and you've been through that and many other people brings to you this subtopic, you're not going to say, send me an email, I'll
Which is
address
why we
yours
want to
and the
connect
rest
you
we
with
don't.
our International Graduate Students Issues Committee, because then you can have more time and more space and more support.
Can we address it as a group? Mike, I wanted to get an answer he wanted to give me instead of you cutting him. Maybe probably by this time I could have heard this version of the story.
Yeah, we
and
can move
understood
ahead
better.
and listen to Yusuf. Yusuf said he could answer briefly, and I'm willing to yield time for that.
I think we all recognize your question is very important. I think there is some question about what our agenda for today is, but I can let you know that we have a group of international graduate students. There's a committee called International Graduate Students Issues Committee. There's a group of 20 students who are advocates for us and our needs and wants. I can put this in our agenda, have a discussion, get some results, and see how we can consult with International Exchange Student Services as well. To work a plan together. I assure you, your voice will be heard. But I do want to also, I appreciate what our speakers are saying over here as well. So for that, for now, I'll say this only, but we can continue our conversation separately and go in more detail.
And I do apologize for putting any
What I'm
pressure
going
on
to
folks. I'm
suggest-
getting pressure in the
sorry,
chat to
what
move
I'm
on.
going to suggest you is,
I am getting pressure in the
just the
chat
last
from
one
other
before I leave.
attendees to
What
move
I'm going
on.
to suggest.
No, you have already taken up a substantial
Can I
amount of
give him?
time
Can
with
I
a
give
very
him my
important issue.
answer
If you
before we
continue to
move?
speak,
Before
I will
you,
kick
I'll
you out
leave
of the
you.
meeting.
You are going to move on.
I'm getting
No, I'm
pressure in
going
the
to get
chat
out
from
of the
other.
meeting. You don't need to take it.
I have getting pressure in the chat from other attendees to move on, and I would like to honor their presence and attendance. I am sorry for the difficulties of balancing competing priorities, but that is my priority currently. Thank you so much for your time. It's a very difficult story, and I really do wish that we had more time tonight to address every every issue in detail. Unfortunately, to honor everyone's time and attendance, not every issue gets to have the attention here that it needs, which is why we may redirect to follow up. All right, moving along, I believe Brendan is our next speaker.
Sorry, Brendan, I just want to jump in quick. Kirsten, I've noted international graduate student support as one of the, I've identified it and aligned what Chris was saying with part of our mission, vision, and values to be part of that fabric. And then I've also put in the chat a link to our petition for those who want to share it outside of this meeting, but just on record, I have it on note, and then Yusuf and the executive, we can follow up accordingly. Thanks, Brendan, for being patient.
Go ahead, Brendan.
Thanks. Thank you to everybody involved with organizing this. And the process is really important. We have to get this right. I think actually what we just heard, even though it went a little bit on a tangent, is a good example of how we need to think about the graduate student experience from a user perspective at Western to really understand how SOGS can be most impactful. Where are people slipping through the cracks? What are the needs that are not being met? And I think hearing from a diverse variety of stakeholders, particularly about negative experiences, although difficult, is quite illuminating because it shows us where we, or perhaps the institution at large, or London, Ontario, has fallen short and people are suffering and hurting. And so I think, recommend devoting significant time to hearing those kinds of cases, not in the context of a meeting like this, but I do think that those perspectives are really important. My question is about how the strategic plan for SOGS will be integrated with comparable strategic planning documents or other frameworks for external stakeholders that we work closely with. I'm thinking, for example, of Western University's strategic plan, the City of London's strategic plan, the USC, I believe, also has a strategic plan. And recognizing that one of the mission statements for SOGS involves advocating on behalf of graduate students and assessing needs, I think we are generally a lot more effective as a student society when we work closely in tandem with those other stakeholders and we understand what their priorities are and how we can influence the work that could be done more effectively together. And so many of the issues that I recognize are important for graduate students now, such as housing affordability, food insecurity, support within Western University. Those are things that perhaps have been identified elsewhere as well at the USC, by the university itself. And I understand that, for example, the executive of the USC and the executive of SOGS, you guys do talk to each other about some things, but I'm not aware of an overarching framework or memorandum of understanding that really makes it abundantly clear, here is how we are going to work together. I have personally, as an advocate working on sustainability, encountered much difficulty trying to liaise with Western, trying to liaise with the USC, even when it's clear that I'm acting and speaking on behalf of SOGS as a coordinator, they say, well, we don't really have that internally, so no thanks. And I think if it was something that was coming from the top down, it would be better for facilitating collaboration. I don't know if there's anyone here who has an answer to my question, but I would like to see that prioritized in the development of our strategic plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Brendan. I just want to respond quickly, but also tag in Nick if you're able to chime in. Nick, as like the lead with the actual documentation of aligning certain strategic plans, might speak to it a little more robustly than I can, but part of consolidating the strategic plan is doing an environmental scan of, like you said, agendas that are already operating in the context in which the society sits. But from your perspective, Brendan, I think a big piece that has been missing historically has been MOUs, memorandum of understanding, not just with the society and Western administration or the president's office, but the USC, PSAC 610, our sister organization, because what tends to happen, especially with Western leadership and with overturning student leader positions, is it becomes contingent on relationships and personalities, which is not set up for successful legacy when there's nothing that might be legally or contractually binding to respect those relationships, even if the people in those relationships have divergent opinions that don't see eye to eye. And that's what's gotten SOGS more or less in a really weak spot to have any powerful hold with Western, because we are not bound by a collective legally binding agreement like other groups. We also don't have operations and governance that have been seamlessly integrated like the USC, because we've done this grassroots horizontal model that our predecessors have been okay with status quo for over 50 years, which is what we're trying to disentangle and redirect. So I have that down. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. And Kirsten, I will mute myself. Ashton, please go ahead.
Hi. Oh, I have a few comments to make. I think what should be core to our mission are our constituents, to ensure that the diverse range of our constituents is based on their right, like wherever they come from, whatever the nationality, whatever religion or non-religion or whatever, that they feel like they're welcome at SOGS and they have a voice. That means that they can participate in anything that SOGS has to offer. That means that they feel like they are represented when SOGS goes to the administration about any issue, that they feel like they're welcome in London. To go off of Chris's point, I think one way we can turn that into an actionable item for the strategic plan is to think about, in our structure, does it make sense to do something like the USC does in terms of having softs where people, like, there's so much. I remember as an undergrad coming to London, there was so much information provided way before I even got to London that made it easy for me to navigate where I need to be, how to get around. And there was still some exploration, but I can't imagine going to a completely different country and then trying to figure that out. So do we need like some sort of soft orientation Or do we need to do more on with the student experience? Because I know from when I worked there, much of their onboarding for summer orientation is focused on the undergraduates. So maybe there needs to be some cross connection with maybe our international students group, plus international student services, plus student experience, to ensure that as graduate students are coming from all over the world, we're like, if you're coming through Pearson, best ways to get to London, or we're going to have like some sort of bus thingy. I don't know. But how can we better transition people to London and graduate life when they're coming from anywhere? And I know I've heard this in a listening session in the past. We've had the same thing with students with disabilities or neurodivergence. The burden of learning all these new things about a whole new culture, different landscape and all that, they didn't feel like they had the time to actually transition and know where the grocery stores are, where their classes are, how to get around on the buses. So how can we ensure that our constituents are set up for the most success and the best experience by making sure that they have what they need before they get here and when they're here and going on? So it's about transition and making sure that that transition is very centered, focused. And again, really drawing in on the international, because as a Canadian, I can figure it out a little bit easier, because it's amazing when I explain to students Canadian laws and how they apply to even international students, or policies or systems. And we are not familiar with how to navigate all those things. It's very important that we at least direct them to the right people, or at least let them know that there are supports and we'll figure it out somehow. So I'm going to leave it at that, because I had other things to say. Okay, maybe because this is related, I'm going to quickly mention this, and this might come to an issue about staffing. I know the USC has a lot more staff support, which allows them to do a lot better scheduling. They have people that run certain things, and it's just like super organized. And again, that helps with the transition of knowledge. So maybe in our structure, we have to think about, as we're growing as a graduate society, and as Western plans to grow to 50,000, and I don't know how much of that's going to be graduate students, how much staff are we going to need to make sure that we can efficiently respond to healthcare concerns, the health plan concerns, or issues about communications, or how to find peer support or support groups, or to deal with childcare and not being able to find that, or not being able to find a doctor. So like all those things. So because again, we have 4 staff members that have very specific tasks to do, but I feel like as we continue to grow, I feel like they're already overburdened. So to burden them with more students, not to say that the students are a burden, it's just that it's so much work. We're going to need to be able to efficiently manage all the requests in the most efficient way and create systems that can do that. I'm so sorry, ASL interpreter. I think I'm going too fast. Give me an okay if we're good. Okay, I'm doing thumbs up, but yeah, thank you.
Ashton. Oh, sorry, Ashton.
Can I speak in for a moment?
Absolutely.
And then Danica, please raise your hand if you want to speak to things. If I may, a prodding question I would love to posit to the group is, we're hearing some really great feedback about the services that international students, neurodiverse students, and other individual students need. I am curious if those are projects you want to see SOGS take on, or if they are things you want to see SOGS advocate for, particularly at the university and municipal level. Next on my speakers list is Kesavi, though her hand just went down, and I might give Danica time to respond. Kesavi, did you still want to speak?
No, sorry, it's not related anymore, so I'll stop.
We can go off topic. Your voice is valuable.
I guess I just want to address the staffing issues. The whole point of SOGS is trying to leverage whatever Western already provides. And with the international concerns, we hear it. We do advocate at any capacity that we can. And for example, with orientations, Western International has specifically reached out to SOGS to tailor for their needs to make sure students don't fall in the cracks. The gap here is communication, making sure offer letters and admission letters have this information relayed so these students don't show up in the country feeling unsupported. So that's something, again, we can continue advocating for. But in terms of shortages and just how small of a team we are, it is a lot to expect from a small group to carry on the work of a university that is equipped with all this information.
Thank you, Kesavi. Danica, I know I cut you off earlier. Was there anything you wanted to add to respond? I'm just losing track of speakers a bit. Beautiful.
Go ahead.
Our next speaker is Donna.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to jump in because I think I have something related to Chris and Ashton's points. I'm part of SOGSM, which is the music part of SOGS. So I'm the chair there. And part of my responsibilities was to update our handbook this year. And as I was going through it, this was again in October because that's when the term starts, I found a lot of things were too late. And one of those things were related to international students. So there was information about before coming to Canada. Well, in October, that information is too late. Or once you arrive in Canada, well, that information is too late. There were also things about getting parking passes, and it said, be sure to get it in early, September or even August. Again, by October, that information is no longer helpful. So I know at the last SOGS meeting, there was talk of changing the calendar or the terms for the leadership, but I think the calendar really needs to be reconsidered for everyone, because I think October is just too late. And kind of what Ashton was saying as far as having overlap maybe between the current SOGS representatives and whoever's taking over next, if there's some overlap to ease people into the organization and into the process, and international students certainly. I think that would really benefit everyone overall to have some kind of handoff instead of it being in October. And I think, again, October is really too late for everything to start. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone like to build on that or respond to that? Ashton?
It was more of a response to an earlier thing about a question that was posed if these are things that we want SOGS to do or if we want SOGS to advocate to do. And I guess in terms of like our structure, if we're supposed to be an advocacy organization, I think this goes back to either building up our leadership in terms of maybe having more positions, people to do external work, to do internal work, because the amount of things that need to be advocated for when we think about better transitions or housing on or off campus, we can't do it all ourselves. And a lot of that we need to encourage Western or pressure Western to do it. But again, with our numbers not being as great as the undergrad, I'm trying to figure out how best can we support our constituents? And then maybe in some cases, we might have to take on some things. So we might have to have, like with the International Graduate Committee, maybe they can do some outreach beforehand. But again, I'm also thinking about the turnover of graduate students because we all start at different times. Most of us might start in September, but there's some that start in January, some that start in May. So getting that information out or having it available consistently or working with, again, SGPS, because I remember the same thing happened with our accessibility stuff when we're setting out admission offers, that there's supposed to be a line making it very clear about where you go if you need accommodations and connecting people right off of the admission part to the accessibility office. So there needs to be, I guess, that advocacy and push for those consistent, clear communications about like, here is a link to a handbook that can help answer your questions, or please go to the international, because again, if you've never been to Western, maybe you don't even know they have an international affairs office. So I don't know, I just feel like with all these communications going out and making things more transparent or easier to navigate, it might come with having a bit more staff, people that can regularly and reliably do that work, whether it's part-time graduate students or part-time people or another full-time position.
Amazing. As a heads up, we'll go about 5 more minutes and then we have a few minutes for recap and thank yous. Danica, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to loop back to pull on what Chris said before he left the call, what Donna and Ashton are talking about, because I'm trying to circle this back to a vision and values position. What I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that if we're to take integration as a core piece of our mission, or like a core value, recognizing the diversity of integration across domestic and international students specifically, that an actionable way to go about integration is recognizing that there are 3 points at least in the academic year when we have graduate students coming into our membership, when we emphasize the fall and winter, where we have failed our members, people before us, myself and my team now, Western included, is when there's so much emphasis placed on the fall that the intake for people joining us in the winter and summer don't get the same support, or at least it's not the same kind of programming that's being supported by staff, reflected in our communications, writ broad. And therefore, we're not giving them the same experience. So at least what I'm trying to pull back, especially from the perspective that we have heard, is that to make a difference and to be accountable and actionable towards that piece is to really think through how we go about and what we conceive of to be integration into this membership, into our group. I'll pause there because I can see Ashton has her hand back up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that what I'm hearing from, again, like even from for as long as I've been here, is that so much information comes in at September that it's either information that is given too late or it's just too much that you don't remember. So being able to, for people once they get their acceptance letters, to be able to explore what's available and how to access those services, or whether it's daycare, healthcare, housing, or orientations, way ahead of time, regardless of what term they start, makes a difference for them to come and feel comfortable navigating London, or at least knowing where the touch points are.
Kirsten, can I just counter quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm also just gonna, again, bring this back, but that's where I see also we should be investing our funds into, or at least thinking through strategically moving forward, that we invest a proportionate amount of the budget of our membership fees into integration. And part of this, honestly, I think COVID demonstrated that for us, especially when things were up in the air, services were all over the place, that moving in lockstep, but then also making sure that as a society, we are investing in the transition period, recognizing the complexity is where we need to be moving. Thank you for letting me just respond, because my notes, I want to make sure that when I'm extrapolating what I'm hearing, that's aligning with what you're saying. So if not, please correct me.
Our next speaker is Yusuf.
Hi, just a point of clarification information, which is this town hall till 7 p.m. or 8 p.m.?
I
know I asked that.
Yeah, I was told 7 p.m. and we do only have one more speaker on the speakers list. So we can certainly extend if there's an appetite for that. I just also want to be mindful of people's time and energy.
Okay, thank you so much. I know that the ESL interpreters are potentially here for longer as well. And I think some people may have questions, so that's fantastic. I guess I'll ask a question as well. I guess I'll begin by thanking the Structural Review Committee for taking on this important endeavor, and also for having this town hall, because I think this is really important that we hear from everyone and ensure that our voices and needs are expressed in the structural update. So thank you to the staff members or the executive team members and counselors, speaker and deputy speaker to continue with their committee work. My question has to do with the upcoming AGM on March 9th, I think, annual general meeting, and the motions that may be presented by the Structural Review Committee, and also the coming months that some motions might be presented by the Structural Review Committee. My question has to do with the nature of consultation with respect to those important motions. And I was wondering about whether or not there's a plan for the review committee to consult with the advocacy portfolio when it comes to, I suppose this is bound to happen, some motions will have overlapping information with relating to advocacy. Would there be a consultation session or request for input from the non-executive officers from SOGS, for example, the commissioners, gender concerns, pride, racial equity, and accessibility, and also our coordinators, sustainability coordinator and SAGE coordinator from Indigenous Initiative, who can really help in centering Indigenous voices as we plan for the structural update or upgrade. And I wanted to know if the draft motions of the AGM will be shared in advance with these people, including me, so that we can give our input and maybe some changes are made beforehand. Thoughts on that from any member from the Structural Review Committee?
Yeah, 2 points. One, as long as we still have speakers, I'm happy to stay on the call. Again, I just want to be mindful if people thought they had an hour to commit, respecting that. But if folks still have more to say, we can keep going. And I can't recall if the Strategic Planning Committee had that on our radar, but I can certainly take it back to the committee and plan to do so, Yusuf.
Thank you very much.
And our next speaker is Karuna.
Hi. Yeah, I just have a point of concern, and therefore, and the concern reflects a question and a recommendation to move forward. I see only 22 people in this strategic town hall, and with a membership of 6,000 in SOGS, this is a minuscule percentage of engagement with members. And that for me translates into something that needs to be done. And I'm not sure what it is. My personal guess is to be more relevant to people's needs, because from what I understand, there needs to be a relevance for people to be interested and to be engaged. And how that is possibly talking directly to the issues that are coming up from students, especially like the one that Chris, put forward. Yeah, I'm a little amazed actually that we are strategizing for an organization of 6,000 people by contacting, or by having 22 people present here today. Thank you.
And that's a wonderful reminder for me to remind folks to spread the word about, we did get close to 1,000 responses on our survey. We are continuing consultations through our website in case that's how folks prefer or are more available to provide feedback. Just as a yes and to your point, because it's a great excuse and opportunity to remind folks of some of our other consultations that are ongoing to complement this town hall. But thank you for the point. I believe our next speaker is Brendan.
Thank you. I'll try and keep this one short. This might be a question, but it could be a recommendation for something to consider for the strategic plan. And it's regarding interfacing with governments. A huge amount of the issues that have been identified as priority for the survey are going to require government support. And I think it's quite important that student voices are being heard by our governments, our local government in London, as well as the provincial government, which is frankly a train wreck right now, and the federal government. I'm wondering, what is the precedent for SOGS to interact externally with governments? Is that typically done by the executive? And my, I guess, follow-up is there a person within SOGS who has kind of a civic awareness and understanding that can support other advocacy by other members of the organization? Thank you.
Danica, can I defer to you for a response on that?
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. So with the fluctuating changes of the executive positions, typically, as it's been in our bylaws, the president, as well as the VP advocacy in particular, are responsible for that. Part of where we run into complexity that I know you are aware of, which is part of the larger conversation that we'll be continuing to have, is that expectations for these roles, if we're asking our colleagues to step into them from a student leader to a student leader, you know they're untenable, you know that they're not well supported, you know that we're working 30 to 40 hours a week, and in this economy, regardless of the assumptions that people make about who we are and our socioeconomic status, we are all just trying to make ends meet. That being said, when it comes to the presidential portfolio and the VP advocacy, moving forward, and part of what we can build into the strategic plan is further delineating, sorry, ASL interpreter, those responsibilities, or if the capacity is just not there, then we create another leadership role to just do externally facing civic engagements, because it's not a question of whether or not it's important or it needs to be done. It's a question of capacity, but it's also a question of integrity, where if I'm turning to you and saying, can you do 5,000 things? As a graduate student, the empathy in me hits the wall. So I think part of this is also refiguring out what it is that we ask of each other. And if that means that we have to take roles that were only really given to 5 people and start to build them out. And if that's what we're calling sustainability in our organization, to not burn each other out and to also make sure we're being accountable, then I think that's part of what I'm hoping we will start to work through with this as well. Because until something gives, until, you know, we can better support each other financially and time, until we can figure out how to rejig the structure and build a different team accordingly, we're moving in these very precarious networks. So I hope that that answers the question, that it's, again, part of the portfolios, but a larger piece. Especially this last fall, I was talking with Josh Morgan's team about civic engagement and Terrence, and that's just based off of my own personal relationships that I have with these members of our government that I can leverage. But when left to a larger portfolio, same with Yusuf in the VP advocacy, there's not even internal direction or structure for us to pull on to inform our work. So as people who came into these roles, that's part of the legacy thinking moving forward, is when we leave these portfolios and the next person steps in and there's no wayfinding, we've failed them already. So I'm also trying to think through, and we're trying to think through, you know, we're all going to graduate in the next couple of years and we're building this, but what is the legacy piece that we're leaving behind? So we are not putting people through the same thing that we went through. And the civic piece is definitely one of them. We're lucky that we have Nick now as a governance manager who can be more on top of it and help with professional outreach if that ends up being the case. And again, since this is his first year really, really full time with us, we'll be taking some of those steps into the next year, or that's what I'll be leaving for the team. So I hope that was a satisfactory answer.
It was, thank you.
Wonderful. And next we had Nita.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, thank you. Actually, I have a question and a confusion actually. A few days ago, maybe about near 2 weeks ago, I have a financial crisis, and I came to SOGS and asked for help, and I couldn't get any support of SOGS, and my question is that, and this something that SOGS can help the students about?
Yeah, this is another difficult one to address because it depends so much on the specifics of your circumstance. So I would highly recommend contacting our staff directly, but it sounds like you already did, to see which of our financial supports might be relevant to you. More broadly, I'm hearing that maybe diversifying our financial support would be relevant and interesting in order to make sure that fewer folks are falling through the cracks.
I already have a meeting with an international advisor. I cannot remember the title exactly, and there was no help. Actually, they didn't even help me to which part of the university to go, because I'm a first-year student and I'm new here, and I'm middle of a very, and yeah, unfortunately they couldn't help me.
Okay, well, I'm glad that you connected with the correct department on the university side. I'm not sure what else in the scope of this conversation we can offer you right now, but I do appreciate the takeaway that SOGS could diversify the financial offerings we have, particularly with a focus on international student needs. I believe Karuna still has her hand up. Karuna, did you have additional comments to share?
Kirsten, could I just respond to Nita, please?
Sure.
Yeah, Anita, one of the executives will just direct message you in the chat right now. So then you can talk with them, and we'll just make sure that we connect, and then we'll get you in contact with us in the office. So I think Yusuf or Kesavi will just message. So please just look out for a direct message right now. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Since Karuna lowered her hand, I believe that we get to move on to Ashton next.
Hi, did Kevin need to say something? Because I saw his hand up for a quick bit. So if he needs to say something, I'll let him go first.
I was about to say exactly what Danica said, so don't worry about it. Thanks.
Okay, good. Okay. I have a few things. So kind of responding to what Karuna has said earlier about, there's only about 22 of us here. I think it's also a sign of the times. A lot of people are in desperate situations, whether it's housing, food insecurity, trying to find daycare, dealing with mental health or other health issues. And then just the state of the world, where maybe in their foreign countries, there's a lot happening that makes them feel unsettled and afraid. And there hasn't been as many mental health supports available in our province to meet the demand that's needed, plus the resources to meet that demand. So that might explain, and I think people might feel like SOGS isn't the answer to those problems. Actually, we have one. Oh, okay. Well, I think, okay, I'll respond to that later. Sorry, I just got a message. So maybe they think that SOGS isn't the answer to those problems, or they've come to SOGS and felt like SOGS can't answer those problems. So maybe our advocacy needs to really focus on Western taking ownership of some of, like, I know some of these things are, societal problems, but Western should, when we think about compensating TAs effectively, or compensating student workers effectively, or ensuring that there's enough housing before we start ballooning the size of the institution, and all the other stuffs. So I think advocacy is key. I think what else, I'm surprised Brendan didn't mention this, but I'm pretty sure it's pretty much implied that one of the core things to our mission should be sustainability, environmental sustainability, being good stakeholders of the lands that we're on, to ensure that we're honoring the Indigenous people. Also to ensure thriving, because it's one thing to be integrated, but how are we supporting the thriving of students? And that it goes into also talking about one of the things that people join SOGS for is that professional development and networking. So how can in our structures we build in more official training or certificates that can help add to that? So joining SOGS or being active in SOGS actually has something tangible besides just, oh, I was on this committee or in this position. But by having this certificate, it proves that I have these skills or this kind of training. So that encourages people, like, even if I'm not into SOGS at the beginning, there's something for me to draw me to it, and then maybe I'll fall in love with it. Like, I've been here for so long, I didn't get involved with SOGS until Jessica kept nudging me to run for the accessibility commissioner thing. Other than that, I felt like my life was too busy and too hectic to even be concerned with SOGS. Like, I just wanted to get through life. So if I had known what I knew now, that there is like friendships that can develop, advocacy strengths that can develop, support systems and networks that can develop, and then also like just being connected to like all these other opportunities, because I've met like so many different politicians inside and outside of SOGS, but reestablishing those relationships and realizing people are coming to me as somebody who has certain knowledge or access, even if they're from the city and seek me out, it means that I'm starting to build that network out even more. So I think we need to do more of promoting that, advertising that, and maybe, like, I know I shared with Heidi those pictures from the award ceremony, but maybe the more we celebrate those accomplishments of our SOGS members and letting people know that there are like council members or what positions they hold, it tells people like, oh, these people are doing great things, but also are still able to engage in this council and help build the society that provides these services. So hopefully I didn't go all over the place there, but, and again, sorry, ASL interpreters. I think I went too fast.
I currently have Danica and then Kesavi on my speakers list. A reminder to please put your hands up if you'd like to be on the speakers list. And before I yield to Danica, could I ask maybe, Kevin, I'll put you on the spot. Can you share in the chat the link to the strategic plan website so that folks know where to share additional feedback if they're so inclined? I just have my share screen up, so I can't do it conveniently.
Sure. So I will say it's really on the top of our homepage on sogs.ca, but I will put it in the chat.
Much obliged, just to get people on every angle. Danica, go ahead.
Yeah, similar to what Ashton drew on from Karuna's response was that I have written down part of where our structure currently fails our members is our council, because we have our operations and governance and fiduciary responsibility all intertwined, which means that while we have peer support, listening sessions, and different spaces where students can go depending on who they are, how they identify, who they're comfortable talking to, council is right now meant to be a forum where graduate student issues can be raised through their department constituents. But because it gets so bogged down with the operations piece and everyone is exhausted and no one wants to stay more than an hour and a half, we never get full engagement, which is a structural failing. And that's part of where, through this plan, when we work through separating our governance and operations, that then we can carve out spaces that can be like this, not the town hall piece specifically, but a space where people can just go and vent and have things heard, and it's appropriate and it's safe and it's not being recorded and they can do what they want. And then we can respond accordingly. The low turnout for this, given that we had about 1,000 people fill out our survey and we're still consulting, is also on track with the society at large. Historically speaking, we do not have strong engagement. We ask people to give up their free time. We don't pay them to attend our meetings. And that can be quite troubling. And this has been going on pre my executive, pre the executives before the pandemic, honestly, trace it back 10 to 15 years, which is a larger structural issue that we're hoping to course correct. And there will be only so much consultation and time we can do before we put this in front of our council of 130 people and say, well, what do you think? And where are your perspectives going to be? With the understanding that it's their responsibility to then bring it back to their departments, consult, and then bring it back to the group. So yeah, is this low number troubling? Absolutely. But the context needs to be taken into consideration. And it's also part of a longer historical trajectory that is consistent with how this organization has been run. I wish it was not, for obvious reasons. And if I could change that, I would, but I can't. So I'm just going to leave that there. But also, again, thank you for everyone who understands that this is still part of a multi-phase consultation process. And Yusuf will talk on the back end, but yes, a lot of internal consultation as well with our current leaders will be followed through.
I'm no longer seeing Kesavi's hand, but I'll give a moment in case she still wanted to speak.
I think the one thing I just wanted to mention as like a student at Western and as a SOGS member, just championing academic success relative to universities like UFT and like UBC, where their research is so notable and there's so much recognition for their degrees, and Western's at that level too, but to also just keep championing all those successes. Kind of like what Ashton already mentioned, when there's student leaders in these positions and they're doing a lot of work outside of SOGS, to make sure that we kind of amplify it, to see like what kind of role our students actually play in society, because that's where you're going next. After you leave this university, what impact are you making in your city or in the province or in the country? So that's kind of like accomplishments that I'm looking for, and that's something that I'm talking about in terms of consultation, something completely different to what Danica was talking about. So anyways.
Necessarily in situations like this, we kind of jump from topic to topic, so no worries there. Ashton, go right ahead.
I like these questions. Will they be up on the page for the structural review so that when people are providing written feedback or additional feedback, they could use these as guiding questions as to what they're looking for? And then also, I think it would be helpful if there was some sort of timeline, so we know when the deadline or a cutoff you're going to be accepting those written stuff. And then finally, because I forgot to ask about the qualitative stuff, because I know I had comments in my survey, and I think the comments speak to the nuances of answers and inform the numbers. When will we be able to hear about the qualitative analysis of it? Or is that coming out at the AGM or afterwards? Sorry, that's a bunch of questions, but just curious.
First of all, thank you for the reminders on those excellent points about administration and getting things posted. And I'll defer to Nick for the rest of the response.
So, sorry, in terms of the qualitative, you said? So that will be published. So we got to post both the results anyways, the quantitative and the qualitative. I was off sick last week, so I have been working to put together the quantitative stuff. I just presented it to the committee last week. And of course, you see some of it here because Kirsten included it in the slides. In terms of the quantitative stuff, or qualitative stuff, sorry, I did go through all the comments and you know, took out all of the NAs or the blanks or the spaces or whatever, the fill-in answers. So we do have a nice Excel document filled with all of the rest of the surveys. It's just more a matter of making it look pretty so that we can publish it. But yes, the plan is to have those comments posted, just if not just to show some ideas to our constituents what things they've brought up. We did have a lot of repeat comments, which is a good sign because that means there's a lot of shared values, specifically when it comes to things like customer service at the grad club was something we saw a lot about, as well as in terms of issues of affordability. We saw a lot of comments about that and making things cheaper, or if things were, or to divert some more resources to some things is where we also saw a lot of comments. So it's currently sitting in an Excel document. The comments have been picked through, but now it's more a matter of getting it to look nice and combining the answers that are all similar, so we show that these are shared values. But yes, there's the timeline would be hopefully before the AGM, just because that will be March 9th. So that should, and if we're hoping for an April council strat plan approval, the AGM to have the result, hopefully the results are long published before the AGM, but it will definitely be before then.
Ashton, go ahead.
Oh, thanks, Nick. And then to kind of speak to Karuna's point about, low engagement just in this town hall, in prep for the the AGM, I'm just trying to figure out, maybe we work with PSAC or something, I don't know, just to get the word out to encourage people. Like, this is one of the few times, well, I guess it's the only time when we get to have a direct say in the voting process, whether you're a council member or not. So how do we get, I know, I'm trying to think about how do you inspire people to engage in the AGM? So we really have that sense of democracy and engagement, and that it's really coming from the voices of our constituents.
Danica, go ahead.
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear, Ashton. And that's where I defer to the expertise of our staff, and especially Heidi, who has done communications for many a year. But I think at least what we're planning for, and I'll defer my time to Nick in a moment, is just being, and again, this is the thing, right? No one has one preferred method of communication. Some people don't like mass emails, some people don't like socials, but it's taking 3 to 4 weeks out of reminders, gentle reminders, but then also repositioning what, right? Like any good thesis defense, what's at stake, right? What's at stake with the AGM, with the things we're bringing forward. So I think it'll just be trying to almost invite the membership in by centering, and to pull on what Karuna said, the ways in which their decisions and votes can affect the needs that are most prominent in their particular context. So again, we pass the budget at the AGM, and that's where membership can see, what is going to support our food bank, emergency loans, housing, what are we looking ahead for the next year in terms of, advocacy efforts. So to draw on what Karuna said, I think a really good strategy that, again, we just need to be more of a stronghold on is reflect what is most important and explicitly tie that to the membership vote at the AGM, which again, in years past, I'm not sure before my time when I showed up how different strategies were used, but again, that's something that keeps me up at night, at least. So thank you for that.
And just to tack on, you're asking the age-old question, and there really is no good answer to this when it comes to student politics. Turnout is probably the most difficult thing to not only get, but to project. And I would know that from running elections at Laurier year after year, where you would bounce anywhere between 30 to 20% turnout. And SOGS is a lot different because we bounce between 5 and 10. Not unlike other institutions like UWaterloo, even their undergrads are very low turnout. What we've noticed by looking at the numbers is that students will come out and vote or turn out when there's something of like massive importance to them. And that is where we have to direct our communication strategy. We can post on Instagram about a strategic planning town hall, and we could send it in emails time and time again. But if it's not something that resonates or is necessarily a value to our members, then they're not going to show up. And that's where we need to not only strengthen what we bring to things like the AGM, but we need to stress that importance. So I'll give you an example. If we brought to the AGM that there was going to be a SOGS membership fee increase of $30 a semester, like we would be taking our $27 fee or whatever it is and upping it an extra $30, doubling it, I guarantee you we're going to have a lot of students turn out to that AGM to vote no. What we've seen over the past number of years is these small, routine, minuscule changes that haven't really resonated with our members, so they haven't wanted to show up. When we dropped the housing survey earlier this year, we had almost 1,400 responses. That's because it was something that was important to students. So that's where we really need to not only emphasize the power that our students have and our members have, but we also need to make sure the content of what their power is being used towards is worth their time and it's a value to them. So I think there's two ways we can go about it. No disrespect to the communications that we've provided in the past, you know, whether it's survey or not surveys, emails or Instagram posts or whatever. But where our focus needs to be is making sure that students can actually use their power where they see it used beneficially. It hasn't been that in the past. So hopefully that answers your question.
I briefly saw Kesavi, so I'll pause to see if she had anything to add. I'll take that as a no. I'm not seeing any further speakers, so I'll pause dramatically in case folks are just being polite. Ashton?
Oh, I'll let Brendan go because I feel like I talk a lot.
Right.
I also talk a lot. Thank you. I just wondered, could you give a brief overview of the timeline for the strategic plan development for our just general reference so we know when future consultations will happen? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So currently we are in the process of setting new timelines. So we had our first stage of the process, our first phase, which is doing the survey, getting the town hall prepped, and making sure we are ready to move on from the analysis after the new year. We met last week. We've gone through the survey results. We're currently consulting, and we're moving into the phase of the strat plan process where we are setting up the values. We're putting those, that data and that feedback into actual pillars that SOGS can be based off of. So currently we're in the process of establishing that. I believe the committee has till February 10th, if I'm not mistaken. I have to send another email out. But after that, it's coming to timelines where we are going to be able to take those pillars and that vision, that mission that SOGS has set, or ideally set for the next 5 years. And then it's consulting with the membership to make sure and reiterate that these are the priority and how they would like to see these things executed. We got a lot of that information from the survey consultation and hopefully from this as well. But we're looking to get more information from our student leaders over the next, month or two, just to talk about feasibility with when we're actually developing the strategic items in terms of the actions. So the dates still need to be set. We have a deadline of April 27th for council. I believe it's the 27th for council approval of this plan. So it's going to be a very ramped up next few months. But the current plan is to have our values set by February 10th And then we're going to start diverting our focus to setting the mission and vision for SOGS, and then reopening for consultation with our student leaders in terms of creating those actionable strategic items where SOGS will work towards over the next 5 years. So consider those your key performance indicators when we do reach out for those consultation, those action items. And I wish I could give you a date on the top of my head. Fortunately, I don't have that yet. We are going to discuss in the next couple of weeks those dates and get back to you all.
I've got Ashton and then Danica on my speakers list.
I just had a quick question, and it just brought me back to the almost strike that happened last semester with the faculty. And I'm also thinking about a lot of turnover in the administration and how that kind of slows down changes at that level or progress on key things that we like to see happen at Western. Is SOG's role as an advocacy organization to like also advocate for better pay for like administrative staff and job security so that people and probably working conditions so we don't see that turnover, especially like for me, it's the student experience office where I've seen quite a bit of turnover in those key positions. And that for me meant a delay in implementing the CAS report. And we're going to be due for another review in a year or so. And then also without having positions like an AODA specialist at the university for campus-wide issues, there's a delay in implementing campus-wide issues as well as addressing the requirements of the AODA. And all of these things have been weighing heavily on my constituents who are thinking about how inaccessibility or lack of services or direction or clarity or transparency is affecting their ability to hold Western accountable or their professors accountable so that way they can access their education or to thrive. And it's really difficult because time is money. Like they get set amount of funding, they have rent to pay, food, and when things get delayed, even if they get more time, it cuts into their ability to progress and to continue to afford their degrees. And it adds to the mental health concerns and also physical health issues. So I don't know if as an organization, we can hold Western to the same standards of like, I don't know. I just want to say like, you know, the whole NDP thing about like, you know, fair working conditions, fair pay, you know, work-life balance and all that. So that way we can keep talented people in the administration so we can move the university's agenda and our goals forward. I'm not too sure if that's part of SOG's role or if it's just separate. For me, it's just about clarity.
Danica, if you want to respond to that and also share whatever else you had your hand up for.
Yeah, Ashton, I mean, that's the part of like SOGS is a student government advocacy organization and union as it's been written for 50 years. And what you said is invaluable because when we're thinking through advocacy and accountability, if we choose to, which I think we should, and we'll hear from the membership as well as we keep formulating this, that also extends to faculty and staff that are the backbone of this institution. And without them, we can't do our work. And at least insofar as student experience in particular, again, we can really target our advocacy and communications with upper administration, even more so, but at least on this call, the person that I am committed to marrying works in student experience and has been put through awful working conditions. So it hits close to home. So when I or the executive at least have engaged in the last year, there is a lot of extreme frustration. And this is where I would look to Ellen Shepard and Florentine and people that are supposed to be leaders at our university that are failing because we have massive turnover. That's not just indicative of how poorly Western treats its faculty and staff. but part of a larger, broader piece of trends in academia, where we have seen a mass exodus of people leaving these positions since the pandemic because the work is not safe, because it's not equitable, because they're not being treated fairly. And I think I hold your comment against the part of me that's like, I want them to leave because they deserve better. But at the same time, we need people doing these roles. And I know accessible education at Western is an embarrassment because of the report they released and because of how far behind we are. But it's pieces like this, which when vocalized as you did, we can take back and tease out to make it more explicit. Because again, we have union groups like UOFA and PSAC, some of them are on the call, where that is such a fierce part of the advocacy that they work for, that SOGS can very much be much more explicit about, and we fold that into the commitment that we want our council to vote on and that we want our council to put into practice. And again, this can be reflected in a broader leadership structure with the executive and reforming these roles too. If we have someone, let's say, like Brendan said, who does external solicitation and civic engagement, we can perhaps fold in, well, then we have someone who's directly keeping tabs on upper administration. I think it's hard to think through and be really optimistic in that sense because everything else is so blasé and frustrating. But these are the kinds of visions that, again, from a legacy perspective, we need to start laying out because they matter. And without them, we will just keep spinning our tires, and we will not just keep failing our members, but failing the people we work with and rely on to provide that support, which is further reflected in, again, even comments around supporting international students. Western International has not been operating with a provost or director for a very long time right now, and their staff is barely holding it together, which does not bode well for us and does not bode well for our members, because they're being met with staff that are at capacity and do not have a strong leader. So it's parts of these conversations as well that when you look at the total picture, and when Brendan said, you know, consider the other strategic plans, I hate Western's strategic plan on record. I'll go on record on this call. It is not reflective of anything that's going to help our student body. I've talked about it with the USC. It is driving us into the worst spot. And again, some of us have been at the Board of Governors meetings. We have elected graduate representatives there. We have graduate elected representatives at Senate. The university and what it's moving towards, I think their plan's going this way, and the SOGS strategic plan will go this way. And now we have to find a way to somewhat align them, or at least know when we have to be doing this dance. Because if we're failing our members now, they're only going to keep growing because Western has targeted increased enrollment. And that's also why now is the time, even if it seems like we are rushing this or we are trying to desperately consult, is that we need something to steer this ship, because Western has already forced our hand to do so. So that's the hill that I'm planting my flag on, at least before I leave this role. And you can call it egotistical or arrogant or whatever you want to call it, but we need something committed to by the membership. Otherwise, we are just going to keep spinning our tires. And I see that as an ethical responsibility when I hold this role as president. So thank you for letting me indulge you with that. But that is part of why this is so important. And we're trying to make the best decisions we can to make sure that the work gets done. Thanks.
And back to Ashton.
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you, Danica, for that. That puts this conversation in a whole new light for me, because as the enrollment increases, I just see SOGS taking on a lot of the burden and trying to catch all these students that are falling through all these gaps. And just from my work in advocacy for people with disabilities, it's exhausting. It's exhausting. And I can't see how we move forward, well, Western moves forward without having strong leadership fill these gaps so that the work can get done. so that SOGS isn't taking up the spillover just because Western isn't providing what they're advertising, which is great services and all these other things. There are great people that are doing their best, but we're not giving them, well, Western's not giving them exactly what they're advertising. So thank you for that.
And I mean, Ashton, if it's any consolation, I think I just wrote that down, that might be a way to even draw on what Karuna said again and make it be relevant to the membership. Is honestly, I think a comm strategy could be highlighting the troubling points of the strategic plan and implications for graduate studies and our membership, and then hold that against how the strategic plan, or at least some semblance of working together, can counteract that. And then we can put that in our messaging for further consult and the AGM. So stay tuned on that. I will think through that more.
All right. I'm not seeing any further speakers. Thank you all of you for so much. I'll defer to Danica in a moment for the recap and final thank yous, but I'll add my thank you to the whole list of just thank you so much for your time, energy, and attention. I so hope that if you have extra energy to spare, you will continue to consult with us and share your comments through the strategic plan website. And Danica, if I can turn to you for a brief recap of what we've captured broadly tonight, so folks know what some of our takeaways are. Or Nick, would you like to speak next?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing. I just wanted to say thank you for coming out and participating in the survey and consultations and all of that. This is something that's still very new to SOGS. As I've mentioned before at council, if you've been there, I was never a Western student. I was never a SOGS member. I'm bringing this experience I have from outside of Western and my own nonprofit experience. So, and I got a lot of hate when I started just because a lot of the things that we're trying to do are almost groundbreaking for this organization itself. So I just want to say, like, thank you for participating. I know not everybody agrees on every topic or value or whatnot, but it's your engagement in these processes that allow us to move forward. And so thank you for participating. Hopefully you can stay engaged throughout the rest of the process, and hopefully the final result after more consultation, whatnot, will be something everybody can be proud of and work towards in an efficient manner. So thank you for joining us in this process of, allowing SOGS to become a much stronger, much more efficient organization.
Thanks, Kirsten. Again, extend thanks, but on record, so we have this captured, and we also have minutes and a recording to fall back on. Main thematic takeaways that we will tease out into vision, values, advocacy direction. I have information as empowerment, integration reflective of our diverse membership that's accountable to transitionary periods, particularly for international students or people joining us from other continents. Accountability and relationship management, however we want to take that up, specifically between the university and other organizations that we work with. I have a note that Brendan spoke about MOUs, because we need seamless partnership, or at least accountable documents dictating our relationships. I also have advocacy bold and italicized and underlined and circled. Part of that being a two-prong approach reflective of our student body and our membership, but then extending a second branch over to what I'm calling our campus backbone, which is our faculty and staff, and the broader group of people that work at the university that make grad studies possible. In addition to that, I also have external facing efforts, and for that I have specifically civic engagement, and then also upper administration. Again, some of these overlap. I'm a critical qualitative researcher, so we will do with this what we will, but I need them documented. And then also at least a takeaway for further consultation strategies and communications relevant to the AGM and our broader membership is, again, make sure that what we are centering is relevant to the membership, but also make relevant the reasons why we're asking people to give out their time and engage with us. Those are my main takeaways as they sit right now upon further review. But yeah, thank you, Kirsten. For formal purposes, thank you, Rosalie and Rebecca. You were excellent. I'm going to stop the recording now so it can begin to buffer. And with that